Hello, this is Castle Does, and I've got some Subnautica action for you. And at this point, I've communicated with the other designers to borrow one batch from each of the neighboring areas so that I can actually transition from their area to my area, make sure that my area actually properly looks like their area. Um, So I ended up starting off with the grassy plateaus section here. So I'm like making my grassy plateaus look like his grassy plateaus, and it sounds kind of silly. Um, so I'm using the materials. I'm getting like everything, like kind of trying to get the little nooks and crannies of the and kind of match things up a lot. And then I grabbed a lot of the props. Like I just I'm using all the same props in this section right here. So I grab props and I grab things, and mostly I'm just getting them in place so that they're in my batch. That way I don't have to worry about going back to his batch again in the future. And I also make sure that this little like crevice right here that he originally added in is looking good and is going to properly transition between the two sections. Once I was done with that batch, then I was able to like unload and then do a full check-in into main and make sure that he's allowed to go back into it whenever he needed to. So it was thanks for letting me borrow your batch. And there we go. Now let me get another area from there. So now that would be another area in the safe shallows, and I do the same thing. But at this point in time, I'm still just getting everything in place. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Getting ahead of myself. I'm not traveling at 8 billion miles per hour, man. It almost kind of feels a little bit like I actually do end up doing this a little too fast, because yeah, I end up getting done like ridiculously short amount of time. Okay, so now I'm working on the two safe shallow areas, and I'm putting more detail because it was all just flat, like in the transition from my area to his area. And there's also another section there with kelp, really the kelp sort of super tall kelp thingies, and those are actually another biome. So there's like two different biomes in this one section of biome meeting up, and you'll notice that I'm keeping my geometry in line with what was done before with the other designer, but the cap textures that I'm using provide much better blending. Like if you might get a chance to see it, but any of the times there's these really harsh edges on all of the geometry on that side. It looks like we're gonna have to go through and eventually rework those materials. I'm totally fine with volunteering to do all that once I'm done with these areas here, if I have to. Like, um, whatever gets better results. It shouldn't be too bad because we now actually have find replace. We actually have find replace. Shame on you, Unity, for not having find replace. Well, at least as far as the materials, I can understand. You got an excuse on that front, but we now got our own. But as far as objects, that is not okay. So, back to actually what's going on. Yeah, I'm just sort of arting at this point. Getting art. Getting all kinds of like bits and pieces of like overhang and everything like that. One of the things I know is like I don't know. A lot of people are probably trained this way, like subconsciously almost. That if you see a height map with nothing on it, it ends up really kind of like losing respect for the level quality of the game itself overall. So we end up with a height map, and then I immediately just start like doing these little bits of overhanging geometry and little tiny things like that, and all of a sudden it's completely, oh wow, this is awesome, even though it wasn't really that much more done. It changes everything. But if you just see a bare height map, oh my god, it's like what is this? What am I even looking at? This is terrible. But if you get those overhangs and a little bit of extra detail here and there, and it immediately jumps out to being something that's different. And in most cases, the only way to do those types of overhangs is with models. So you take like a Brock model and you kind of like jam it. With this, I just sort of drag a paintbrush right over the top of something, and it just sort of brings it out, you know. So I do a little bit more detail on that area from his stuff, I guess, in preparation for in the future when we start actually replacing a lot of the materials and kind of wanting to get everything in place. I want to get the level of quality as high as possible in as short amount of time as possible. So I'm bouncing back and forth because at this point I realize that I'm kind of ahead of schedule, and I can start actually getting some of the larger models. I consider large props to be part of the level geometry because the large, huge props like this tend to actually be basically just part of the level. They're not just these little details. So I kind of feel like those big shells uh, count as level geometry. So I get a lot of those in place, and I don't even know. I wonder how many polys those large shells are. Okay, so all right. Thank you for watching.